ready? All right, terrific. I want to encourage everyone to take their seats. We're going to go ahead and get started with our final panel discussion today. I'm Damon Wilson, Executive Vice President at the Atlantic Council. Let me first thank all of you for staying with us through to the very end of the Wroclaw Global Forum. It's been a fantastic 2 days, and we're just delighted to have you through this wrap-up discussion. I think this afternoon's discussion is about transatlantic partners. Are we preparing to meet the same threats? I think this is a very apt way for us to bring to a conclusion our discussion today. And for this conversation this afternoon, we've got three terrific guests. Let me take a moment to introduce our colleagues. To my right, Zsolt Nemeth, who has been a figure in Hungarian politics, a fixture of Hungarian politics, but importantly for this forum, he's been a fixture in the transatlantic relationship with a voice that's been heard in Washington throughout the years, currently serving as the state secretary at the Hungarian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, a longtime party leader of Fidesz, and a strong advocate of the transatlantic partnership. To my left is Ambassador Alexander Vershbow, Sandy Vershbow, who's now the Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs at the Pentagon, and in that impossible job, he's in charge of Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. So as you can imagine, we're terrifically grateful that he's been able to find time to join us here in Wroclaw. He's joining us just after being with Secretary Gates in Brussels for the NATO ministerial, something that we will definitely delve into this afternoon. But Ambassador Vershbow brings a wealth of background to the job that he has now at the Pentagon, having served as ambassador to NATO, ambassador to Russia, ambassador to Korea. He's been involved in dramatic transformations in the U.S. security relationships, both in Asia and in Europe, since the end of the Cold War, and is known for his efforts to support democracy and human rights in the former Soviet Union as well. Also relevant for our discussion today, he's the NATO Deputy Secretary General Designate, headed out back to Brussels in a year from now. And on my far left, we have Maciej Watuski, who is the CEO of Polish Telecom and a good friend of the Atlantic Council, now a board director of the Atlantic Council. Maciej is one of the most strategic, thoughtful leaders in the international business community that I've had the opportunity to meet, a skyrocketing career in the private sector. And as Fred mentioned last night, Maciej is really one of the reasons why we are here today. He was the brainchild behind the Wroclaw Global Forum, providing both the energy, enthusiasm, intellectual vigor to put the concept and practice in place that led to this forum. So Maciej, we're grateful for that and delighted to have you join this wrap-up conversation. Our topic today is, are we preparing to meet the same threats? I think it's apt that we close our discussion because this hits at the fundamental of the transatlantic partnership. It's at the core of whether the United States and Europe, a transatlantic community that's bound by the same values, are we bound by the same worldviews? Do we see the world in similar fashions, or are we beginning to think about our threats, and do we see the world differently? Do we see threats differently? And what does that mean for our partnership, our alliance? The answer to this question this afternoon, it hits at the strategy that we're going to pursue within the alliance. It plays to the tension we've had in the process of developing a new strategic concept on the focus on collective defense, territorial defense, Article 5, reassurance about threats close to Europe, as well as the threats that are focused on wherever they may emanate from, a more global perspective, and those that call for a more expeditionary alliance. The strategic concept was designed to address this purpose. But I think importantly and topically, this question also speaks directly to Secretary Gates' core message in his farewell address. It was a tough message, or it was meant to be a tough love message. I think it was quite a tough message. But how we see the world impacts how we prepare for that world. And I would extrapolate that the logical conclusion from what we heard from Secretary Gates' critique is that maybe we're not preparing to meet the same threats as we look forward to the future. And yet we've just come out of this long process within the alliance of forging a new strategic concept, which was meant to bridge many of these conceptual divisions and help forge a way forward within the alliance on practical policy. So I want to turn to Sandy, to Ambassador Vershbow, to kick off our conversation and help us understand the message that Secretary Gates left in Brussels, a strong message about a warning about the dire consequences for the alliance, given the trajectory our European allies and their investment in defense were headed on, warning of a two-tier alliance. How do we square his message with the fact that we've just spent the past year trying to reconcile these differences in a common strategy through a new strategic concept?
Well, thanks, Damon. It's a great pleasure to be here and to have been launched here almost in ballistic fashion by Secretary Gates to come the day after his very important speech. And I think the way you characterized it is probably right. But I think it was spoken, as he himself said during the visit in Brussels, as someone whose whole professional life was shaped by his relationship with the alliance and the importance of the alliance. And it's important to say something that didn't get quoted so much in the press. He ended his press conference by saying he leaves confidence that this nearly 65-year-old alliance will endure and prosper. It's the oldest, most powerful, and most collaborative joint endeavor of democratic peoples and governments in all of human history. So I think his speech should be read against the backdrop of that statement. He's a real fan of NATO, but he's worried about some of the trends, about the gaps in capabilities, which, if they aren't remedied, could create some serious problems down the road. But as to the question you've asked about whether we share the same worldview, I think we still do. I mean, clearly each country may have different priorities, but one of the things that makes NATO such a going concern is that we're somehow able to bring our different views together to take into account the different perspectives of our allies and come out with a common approach that makes us, I think, all the stronger. And I think one saw that to some degree in the strategic concept exercise. We were able to, I think, avoid what many people predicted would be a bitter struggle over some sensitive issues, including view of Russia. People thought that the alliance would fall apart over the differing views between Central Europeans and the older allies over how to deal with Russia, but that wasn't the case, thanks in large degree to the excellent initiative of establishing a group of experts chaired by Madeleine Albright. Adam Rotfeld was the Polish representative. Through this exercise, there was an effort to really understand one another's perspectives, to travel around the alliance to solicit views, and I think we ended up with a common approach on that issue and on just about everything else, recognizing that there are new transnational threats that we do have to pay increasing attention to, whether it's terrorism, piracy, proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, cyber threats, and I think we have our work cut out for us in terms of how we address those. But at the same time giving equal weight to the traditional role of NATO, collective defense, territorial defense, recognizing that that also requires some new capabilities, and missile defense is one example of a new capability that gives physical expression to NATO's Article 5 commitment. But I think the best measure of why I believe we do share the same worldview is the fact that the United States still sees Europe as its #1 partner when it's dealing with just about any challenge, whether it's in the security field or in other fields. Because it's not just about NATO, it's about a broader relationship in which we work together to promote democratic values, to help expand prosperity around the world. And when we face a challenge and an opportunity, such as the Arab Spring, it's again an example of where we're working closely with our European partners to come up with a common approach to seize this opportunity so that, as someone said, the Arab Spring doesn't turn into a winter of discontent. So I think that we start with a common worldview, but there are problems. Secretary Gates was quite frank. With only 3 weeks to go in the job, he was absolutely determined to tell it like it is, but I think he's been doing that throughout his professional life. He made clear that the gap on the military side has widened. If the United States spent 50% of the total NATO defense spending a decade ago, now we constitute 75%, and that's simply not healthy. As he pointed out, the American public, the American Congress, is going to increasingly raise questions about the basic fairness of that bargain. But Secretary Gates also pointed out that Europe has come through in Afghanistan. When President Obama articulated a new strategy and committed additional U.S. forces. Europe answered the call and put in another 10,000 forces of its own. There's a commitment to stay the course under the strategy agreed at Lisbon. And although participation in the Libya operation may not be as broad as we would like, NATO responded very quickly, was able to conduct the planning and stand up an operation in almost record time, and we have, I think, averted a humanitarian catastrophe. So I think Secretary Gates was calling out problems that loom on the horizon that need to be addressed, recognizing that we may never close the gap entirely and that there will always be a division of labor in which our European partners may contribute not only in the military sphere but in other spheres. And that's where I think a stronger partnership with the European Union is critically important, both for the United States and I think is something that NATO needs as well, so that we can marry the hard power and the soft power more effectively and continue to make this transatlantic partnership as effective in the future as it has been for the past several decades.
Thanks, Sandy. I want to turn to Zoltan in just a second to ask about whether this is an effective strategy to motivate change in European behavior. But let me pick up on one thing you said about missile defense, which has been a signature accomplishment of the administration and of the alliance coming out of the Lisbon summit. I think as you think about missile defense, particularly here in Poland today, it sometimes hits at the core question we're talking about, whether we're preparing for the same threats. When Americans talk about missile defense and the project we're undertaking here within the alliance in Poland, it's a missile defense system that is very clearly focused on a threat emanating from Iranian ballistic missiles. Yet when you talk to a Polish audience, when you talk to many Poles, the way they see missile defense is often quite a bit of attention and focus on the benefits that come from the project because of the deployment of Patriots to Poland. The F-16 aviation detachment, which was announced during President Obama's visit. These are very important factors of getting an American presence on the ground in Poland. These have nothing to do with threats emanating from Iran. So even the concept of missile defense and how it's playing out here in Poland, does it underscore a difference in threat perception? Does it underscore a difference in priorities?
Well, maybe my Polish friend wants to address that as well. I think that we were encouraged in the debate leading up to the Lisbon summit that allies were increasingly in agreement with us that there is a growing threat from proliferation of ballistic missiles, especially the programs that Iran is embarking on, which if you take together with their nuclear ambitions, could pose a real existential threat, not just to the United States and our Middle Eastern allies, but to Europe. So I think there was a recognition across the alliance that this is a real threat that does need to be addressed. And Poland's willingness to actually host one of the two land-based SM-3 sites, which will arrive here in 2018 as part of the third phase of our phased adaptive approach, reflects, I think, a commitment to the collective defense of all allies. Poland is taking risks in being prepared to host, just as Romania is taking risks in hosting the first site in 2015, and that shouldn't be that should be recognized. Does Poland also welcome U.S. boots on the ground and a more physical embodiment of the American defense guarantee? I think that's the case, and I think there's been an understandable interest ever since this process of NATO enlargement began, and when we made decisions back in 1997 that we weren't going to station substantial combat forces on the territory of the new members, that having other ways of demonstrating the American commitment were all the more important. And so we're very pleased to be able to have a kind of a win-win. We're putting in place an architecture that will defend all of European territory, and at the same time demonstrating our firm commitment to the security of a key ally, Poland.
Thanks, Sandy. Let me turn to my Hungarian colleague. I think Sandy accurately pointed out that Gates tried to make the point that this tough love message was coming from someone who actually supports the alliance and cares about the future. His remarks, I thought, were interesting in making the point that as Secretary of Defense, he never could have imagined that the alliance would have doubled its commitment, the non-U.S. contribution in Afghanistan. during his tenure. That was certainly part of it, but it was a very tough message for our European allies to hear. A strong warning that future U.S. leaders may not consider the return on investment worth it. That's pretty serious talk, pretty blunt. I want to know from you, Zsolt, how does this sound to European ears? How does this sound to a European audience? Does a message such as this from Secretary Gates, does it have an impact? Does it help motivate change in European policy? Does it turn off a European audience? And the same sort of corollary to this, you're a longtime political figure in Hungary. How do you make the case to a European public, a Hungarian public, that this investment is worth the return on the investment?
Thank you, Damon. I would like to greet the Polish audience especially and everybody in the room, the mayor of Wroclaw. I would like to express my gratitude for the invitation and to congratulate to the Atlantic Council. As you know, dear friends, the Hungarian EU presidency is soon coming to its end, and we are going to hand it over to you, to Poland. We hope that it will be a smooth transition, and we hope that the results that we have achieved, and hopefully by the end of the month we are going to achieve, you will be able to continue, and we can demonstrate to our European and international partners that Central Europe is mature, and we are able to become an equal partners inside the European Union to manage global questions, global matters. This will be the real entry into the European Union for you. It is a real entry for us in Hungary, and I have to tell you, we have learned a lot from it, and you will learn. This event is a very good exercise to practice your EU presidency. Congratulations to you, Mayor. Yesterday evening, that was my impression. And I'd like to greet the awardees as well, who are partly with us. I was very much moved yesterday evening. I am for a good 21 years in the Hungarian parliament and over 23 years in direct politics as a founding father of Fidesz, my party. And the freedom fight we went through was coming back to me tonight when we have witnessed all the different stories of freedom fights. It was not easy for you, for the Atlantic Council, to put together the program because throughout the past half a year a lot of things happened, and it was very well reflected in the program, so congratulations to that. Coming close to your question, Damon, Secretary Gates' speech. I think we know that Secretary Gates could allow such a speech in such circumstances. And I think we all know that a last speech of a departing Secretary of Defense is very important. It is a kind of legacy. How I read that speech I read with fear that in case there is not going to be more equal division of burden inside the alliance, NATO may be over. And I think a departing Secretary of State can allow such a strong message. Me personally, I feel that there will be quite sensitive and strong reactions. I wouldn't exclude strong reactions on behalf of European partners, but I read positively. It was not the burial of NATO. It was not the expression of the lack of interest by the United States in the maintenance of NATO. But I'm sure there will be sounds, voices which will suggest that this gesture was not wise on behalf of the US Secretary of Defense. Concerning the substance, when we talk about NATO, we all know that NATO is the heart of the transatlantic cooperation. And we in Central Europe, we have a very strong commitment towards NATO because we know how much we owe to the United States, to NATO, how much we owe to Ronald Reagan, who we will celebrate in the near foreseeable future. On the 29th of June, we will unveil his bust in Budapest and in Prague and in London, who would be 100-year-old if he lived. But we are very grateful to Ronald Reagan, to the United States, and we value very highly NATO in Central Europe. Probably that is the chance for our Central European EU presidency, that we can make clear to everybody, especially our pro-Atlanticist partners, that there is a contribution on behalf of Central Europe to the transatlantic strengthening of political, economic, and security ties. This might be one of the crucial messages, and it is not an accident that defense is a priority for the Polish presidency, and I fully share this priority in the Polish presidency program. So NATO for us is the heart of the transatlantic cooperation, and we believe that the transatlantic cooperation is a necessity. It is a precondition from the global security. Without a successful NATO, I see a very dim future for the globe. And I am sure that Secretary Gates has the same approach and understanding, and no way he wanted to bury NATO and to find an excuse for the American retreat in the pro-security and pro-NATO policy of the United States of America. We all remember that a few years ago, especially around the Iraqi invasion, the transatlantic disagreement was on the peak. And I think the Lisbon summit was very successful because we have been able to reinstate an accord. We talked about Article 5, yes, but my favorite article is Article 4. And you know, when the Americans speak about money, the Europeans speak about Article 4, about partnership, about cooperation, about intensive dialogue. And I think that's what we have been successful in Lisbon. We were able to identify who we are, what are the challenges, which direction we go. And that's why I think NATO is in a good shape. I don't think the Secretary's message should be understood that NATO is in a danger. I think NATO is in a good shape at this stage. And it doesn't mean we wouldn't have a lot of tasks. The heart of the message is that Europe has to grow up. The common and security and defense policy of the European Union is not yet mature, and it's true. I fully agree with the heart of this message. But we have to be realistic, and we have to see that Europe is not yet over the global economic and financial crisis. The Hungarian presidency, we are doing our utmost to fix euro. We are not euro member country either, but the six-pack economic package was in the heart of our efforts in the last half a year, and we hope we will be successful. There is no guarantee that in the European Parliament it will pass. We hope it will, and in that case, at the European Council at the end of June, we will be able to announce that the economic package has been successful, and Europe may have a perspective to overcome the economic crisis. However, the austerity approach to economic questions in Europe will remain with us. And we have to remain realistic. And I think we will be over, and when we are over the economic crisis, again, the subject of raising the defense budget substantially can be taken on the political agenda in Europe. But meanwhile, I think we have a unique opportunity, and that is called sharing and pooling by defense experts. I'm not a defense expert, but defense experts speak about sharing and pooling of our potentials. And I think if we don't have enough resources, we have a very good reason to establish a much more coordinated capability for NATO. For example, in Hungary, we are very proud for our C-17 aircrafts. It is the operation of 11 countries, and we are having a collective airlift capability in Hungary, which is a kind of smart development. It is a smart type of pooling and sharing. So in case we have less resources, we shouldn't sit back and relax and complain that there is not enough resources. But probably we could make, and we can make, more integrated on capability side the alliance, which doesn't mean that we shouldn't constantly pressurize the members of the alliance to raise their budget. So this is the heart I'd like to say. I understood positively the Secretary's message. It may have negative responses, I can't exclude it. But at the same time, I hope that we have a positive phase in the life of NATO, and we believe that until we will be able to raise the defense budget, we have a task. We can increase our harmonization and ability to pool our potential inside NATO. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sil. Thank you very much. I want to pick up on two themes that you put on the table here on the economic budget side, as well as some of the pooling and sharing. But let me turn to Maciej, if I may, for this, and ask you from the perspective of a successful CEO that has to make tough choices in a difficult financial environment. Let me lay out a couple of points. Larry Summers, before he came into the administration, asked the question, how long can the world's biggest borrower remain the world's biggest power? Admiral Mullen, our top military official, has declared before our Congress that the national debt is becoming the greatest threat to our national security. As the United States struggles with managing its debt, as Europe is struggling with the sovereign debt crisis and where to go within the European Union on the issue of these bailouts, how does this impact the transatlantic community's ability to prepare for future threats? You've had to navigate tough choices in your position. How should political leaders be thinking about what they need to be doing now to prepare the country, to prepare their countries, to prepare their transatlantic partnership to act?
Okay. Thank you for the question, for the invitation. Maybe first of all, Ambassador Verzhibov provoked me on this Polish vision of the F-16.
Please, yes.
And I think that this is changing, and this is changing as Poland is changing with the events like this one. Means I believe that we are elevating the debate. We have today Wroclaw Global Forum, people from Europe and people from outside Europe, North America, Africa, discussing Middle East, discussing global problems. And I would say 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the F-16s or the SM-3 would be seen as a local political element as the element of the local political landscape. Means it was to protect us from, I believe, Lithuanian or Slovakian tanks, or potential attack of the Belarusian troops. Means it will be seen in this dimension. Today, we are a member of NATO. We host important events in Warsaw, and I believe that more and more, of course, there's elections in every country, normally every 4 years, but I think that the vision tends to elevate. And more this presence will be seen, and should be seen, by the way, by Polish citizens as an element of our global security network, because we are at the same time exposed to the global threats while our soldiers are being present in Afghanistan and many other places. Now concerning the threats and how I do see the threats and are we ready to face them? Well, first, first I think that you in the business life, you are ready to face only the past threats. Means the new ones, by definition, you don't know them. You can build a structure which eventually gonna help you to analyze the new threats very quickly and prepare the answer. But nobody in the business would say, "I'm ready for any threat." I'm just sitting here, and whatever happens to the telecom business in the world, the Polish telecom gonna stand up for next 100 years. It's important today to select what we see in the today's world. We see those threats changing every day. You've seen that today suddenly the potential Iranian nuclear bombs have been covered by the Arab Spring. Then the Arab Spring have been covered by this terrible killing Spanish cucumber, which by the end is not true. But in today's world we have the threats which may go like a snowball, which may kill economies, because the poor Spanish with their cucumbers, they have a serious additional problems. So I think that what we need first when we discuss about threats is to analyze the real ones, to find the real ones before we act. And the pressure, the outside pressure is very big. Now concerning this economical situation, are we still capable to face threats with this debt problems? Well, first of all, I think there is a good point in the global crisis. Means 5 years ago, nobody, but really nobody, I really can take a vote in this room, would expect that the French government gonna be able to increase the retirement age. Come on, 5 years ago, who would expect this? Or the German government will go to the same direction. So I think there's some benefits of this crisis, that we are going into the much deeper reforms than what we did in the past, let's say 40, 50 years. We have been lucky because the crisis wasn't as long as we have been expecting, and as again the media look on the cucumber have been claiming in the 2008. A lot of the reforms, unimaginable reforms have been launched. So the companies, the banks survived. The auto industry is quickly repaying the debts in the state help and aid in US. So I believe that we learned a lot, and we suddenly initiate reforms which wouldn't be possible 5 years ago. It's not enough. We have big threats in front of us. The challenges are very big, but the movement and there is the authorization by the citizens to move, to start the reforms. Even Greeks are starting to discuss about reforming the retirement policy, which is something impossible some days ago. So there's a movement. Let's use this energy, because of course the challenges are much bigger. And getting into the view of the transatlantic relation, we have been discussing about this European intervention in Libya.
And Maciej, let me ask you a question on this, because I've heard you talk about corporate strategies in difficult times. From an American looking at Europe at a time when we feel like we need Europe as a global partner, a global power with us, Europe's in crisis, which is actually straining the solidarity within Europe. We're seeing an end, the slow of European integration, tension, and solidarity within Europe, an end to the idea of enlargement at a time when we need a more confident Europe as a global partner because of what's happening on the economic scene, which has an impact on how we're going to work together to deal with global threats.
Yeah. So it's what is happening in Europe. It's absolutely against the corporate logic. Means the corporate logic in the time of the crisis, when you have weak players facing the global challenges, is to consolidate. And I think that's somehow, if I would see it from the company perspective, I would say follow the Microsoft Nokia, follow the Sony Ericsson, follow the Alcatel-Lucent. Means consolidate. There's the moment if we don't have enough resources, and we know perfectly that we not be able to do it, we should rather go into the putting the resources together. Otherwise, I was just speaking about Libya. When you look on our real military power in Europe, means we are good enough to have tanks and fighting jets for a 3rd of May parade in Warsaw and 4th of July parade in Paris. But that's all. We need much more. So if you eventually combine those two forces, we're still gonna rent those jet fighters and tanks, because we're lucky that the national days are basically spread through the year. But let's put those resources together. Let's go into the M&A policy. Let's consolidate what we have. And this I would do it as a businessman, and I'm just here as a citizen of Europe. But I think that a good example is defense, and I must pay tribute, I believe, to Prime Minister Kaczynski, who some years ago launched this, at one of the meetings, launched this idea of the consolidated common European army. I think it's much more easier than to go into the federal European government, because the army, the big advantage that they are generals, and once you find 2, 3 civilians with a vision giving them the order and citing a proper order, the generals are executing, at least in our democracies. So I believe that this is one of the ways to act with courage towards the threats from the NATO perspective, to put it together. Otherwise, we're gonna finish with the situation where our 20th century armies will not be able to communicate with the 21st century virtual soldiers from North America, and we need it. We must. There will be no free ticket, free ride of security and protection from US to Europe. We must participate, and we have budgets. Means I understand that we have the small defense budgets, but if you expand this definition of defense, if you suddenly understand that in NATO you have anti-terrorism actions and you have cyber-terrorism, anti-cyber-terrorism actions or cyber-terrorist protection actions, if we add European budgets which are today dedicated to defense, but as well to the anti-terrorism actions and to the cyber protection, suddenly it's much bigger. So putting them together creates a chance, and this is my, I would say, vision. If I have to draw a parallel between the business world and the political world.